For always being somewhere where mainstream media is not.
I mean, it really has, to me, has been an economic Hunger Games that's being depicted by corporate media that happens to take advertisements from companies like John Deere as the wealthiest country on earth, American dream, work hard. Can you kind of talk about the disconnect you felt in these conditions working at John Deere while you were getting less and less, but it's depicted much differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it all. Look, corporate media controls the narrative, and that's what's fed to people every day.
Talk about the threat beyond you to people fighting these pipelines, this pollution, and this greed and evil.
What's happening to me is a new fossil fuel industry playbook.
You know, Joe Biden, proclaims to be the most pro-union president in history. Where's he at? Where's he talking now?
Joe Manchin has been the thorn in the side of West Virginians for decades.
We're just a number to them. We're as replaceable as a light bulb.
We are now over 7 years past this catastrophe in Flint, where residents, many of which are behind me, were poisoned.
Go all the way back to the media now. They're not there for us. There's no one there for us. We're all here struggling, and nothing's being done.
You're not talking about like residual scars from 6 years ago. You're talking about stuff you're getting now.
This is in the last 24 hours.
You know, I always talk about how to get away with murder. Ask Snyder, ask Nussel. They're all helping him do it.
She was very family oriented. She light up the room when she comes.
Oh, and they wanted to get rid of her pension.
Oh,
so, yeah. So, like, all the senior nurses, not only are they're not getting the wage, their pension is being frozen.
You're currently homeless, working at Amazon?
Currently am, yeah. I have been homeless for the past, 2.5, almost 3 years that I've been here now. And I haven't been able to afford a place.
This whole sordid, crappy affair is completely illegal.
Hey, yo, stop it!
Unmask them! Unmask them!
Fuck you!
Unmask them!
Literally private property all over the fence, even though I believe we're on a public sidewalk. So in Amazon's world, it's private property.
Our elected officials, both of mine, Shelley Moore Capito and Joe Manchin, has just like always, like they did with the minimum wage raise, ripped the people out.
Corporatist politicians like Nancy Pelosi are telling us we have to wait longer.
We are now living at a time where a generation must rise up, not out of anger, but out of survival.
I end up getting a call from work in March, and I was evicted.
I be wanting to snap, I be wanting to go crazy because it's destroying me and there's nothing else to do. But I hurt, I cry every night.
We're back to normal. Well, I'm going around and it seems like we're just back to the shitty normal that's only getting worse.
If back to normal means we're back to being underpaid, it means we're back to being worked like dogs, it means that they're back to harassing homeless people, you can keep your fucking normal.
She did not say, okay, I'm going to go to be a doctor, and this is something that I'm just going to have to do. I'm going to have to come in here and do this. She did not. She signed up to be a night sorter at Amazon. She had no business COVID testing.
Corporate media had us believing that we're just lucky to have a job. We're lucky. If you're still at a place that still offers insurance and you're not paying, you're lucky.
Seconds. It's not minutes that your time off task starts. They track you down to the second.
And the houses are pretty nice, pretty big over here, as opposed to the east side, which is fairly poor, less signs in general. But you can see vacant lots. I'm pretty sure the Flint Journal knows about it. Broke it in the Detroit Metro Times and The Intercept on Governor Rick Snyder's administration. Their phones were deleted right before the launch of a criminal investigation. Health officials' phones had no messages on them. The governor refused to hand over key documents. I mean, to be honestly, I know you guys know about it. I don't know why you're not reporting it.
I will point out that all the officers here are white.
Joe Biden, you said that if we get you into office, we elect you into office, you got our back. You said, black community, I got your back.
I don't understand why they're here. I don't understand why they have to do all this because one of their people decided to kill somebody.
Fucking kidding?
Seriously? They can go home and tell their kids what they did.
Leave the area, guys. All right, everybody's got to move.
This is the perfect physical manifestation of why we need to defund the police.
But the right thing to do, the morally just thing to do, is to bring relief to people. And God knows that people all over this country are suffering. About 140 million people who live in poverty or poverty adjacent. And those people are black. Those people are brown. Those people are white. Those people are indigenous. Those people are Asian. Poverty touches all.
You know, what's amazing to me, because we're seeing strikes happening all over the country, is workers who have been, exploited and beaten down. They're kind of saying enough is enough. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
I think what we're seeing across the country is, even though some workers' wages are viewed as high, it's not really keeping up with the cost of living. And then they look at the corporate side of things, where executives are making hundreds and hundreds of times what a line worker does.
They counted on people not being able to fight back. And we figured out a way through grit and struggle and tenacity and the support of so many people.
It seems to me there is some hope. I'm not saying this will overthrow the system tomorrow, but what do you think about, workers are kind of finally saying, well, what else do we have to lose?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is workers are becoming more informed, with sites like you, social media, people getting their message out, and just, the climate right now.
It's also bringing us closer together as a union, as a group of people.
It's the workers going out there and making this work. It's the old adage I used to tell when I would sit in on negotiations. I go and I trade my labor for a wage. You're not giving me nothing. I'm making that wage.
Listen, you can't unite with someone who don't want to unite with you. So you have to be willing to really fight and do what you need to do when you have the majority.
Not every day is going to be a good day, but the victories that we do have, we definitely amplify them.
Democrats have basically tried to straddle the line where they're more woke and not verbally as offensive as the Republicans, but their policies basically leave these same people to fend for themselves.
Same story, right? It's the same story every time. One's just one's read like a horror story and one's read like a fairy tale, depending on your eyes. But it's the same ending every time. We know how this book ends.
I mean, the struggle is what makes us stronger. I don't have a lifetime of government experience because I've worked actual jobs.
A type of liberation that transcends all understanding. That having universal health care is a type of understanding. Canceling student debt is a type of understanding.
How can a progressive combat that going forward to not be smeared out of the race?
I want progressives to be very resolute, and I want us to keep on running because we are winning. I raised $6 million in this race. I was outperforming every other candidate in this race until that dark money came in.
I'm telling you that the reason why your life is so crappy is because the person that you voted in, not thinking about it, has been ruining your quality of life. Let's talk about the things that actually matter.
We're trying to change the working conditions not only for Starbucks workers, but hopefully this leads to more people being able to say, enough is enough.
I admire your work, Jordan, on Flint water issue and so many other issues. And I just want to urge people listening to continue to support Status Coup.
Group of people.
It's the workers going out there and making this work. It's the old adage I used to tell when I would sit in on negotiations. You know, I go and I trade my labor for a wage. You're not giving me nothing. I'm making that wage.
Listen, you can't unite with someone who don't want to unite with you. So you have to be willing to really fight and do what you need to do when you have the majority.
You know, not every day is going to be a good day, but the victories that we do have, we definitely amplify them.
Democrats have basically tried to straddle the line where they're more woke and not verbally as offensive as the Republicans, but their policies basically leave these same people to fend for themselves.
Same story, right? It's the same story every time. One's just like, one's read like a horror story and one's read like a fairy tale, like depending on your eyes. But it's the same ending every time. Like we know how this book ends.
I mean, the struggle is what makes us stronger. I don't have a lifetime of government experience because I've worked actual jobs.
A type of liberation that transcends all understanding. That having universal health care is a type of understanding. Canceling student debt is a type of understanding.
Jordan Chariton with Status Coup, 6 o'clock Eastern time. Hope everybody's having a lovely, lovely day, staying safe in these COVID times and trying times for many. Delighted to be joined by two great guests today to take us through a variety of topics on the United Corporations of America. I'm joined by Lila Charles Lee, as well as Pat Cody. Did I botch either of your names?
Aces, look at you.
Well done.
I'm going to call you Pat the Burner, but your real name is Pat.
That's
Cody.
fair. Or Peter
guys,
Douche. If you want to call me Peter Douche, I could live with that.
Perfect. And you guys co-host Punch Up Pod, which we could talk about in a bit. But I wanted to mix in some new guests here in the new year. And I've followed your tweets and some of your work before. So everybody watching, please press that like button right under the video. Please share this live stream. Press the like button, share, super chats. All that is welcome. Full disclosure, I don't feel good. I haven't felt good for 3 days. But we live in these ridiculous times where, all right, do I go and stand online for 3 hours to see if I have COVID? If I don't have COVID, possibly get COVID waiting on the line? Or do I just kind of deal with what I have now? And if it's COVID, great. So I'm siding with the deal with what I have. If it gets worse, I'll go wait on a line. But right now, I just kind of feel really run down, have a cold kind of thing. So who knows? Could be COVID, maybe not. But that's kind of the messed up part, isn't it? You know, we don't have available rapid tests. I can't really go right now to CVS where I live to get rapid tests. To wait online, you're talking hours where I am. I'm sure where you guys are too. And also going somewhere to take the test, you're talking possibly 4 or 5 days at this point to get a result. So that's 2 years into this. Any thoughts on that before we move on?
It's the individualized response to a global pandemic. You're on your own out there, buddy. Just do it. Take some vitamin D.
There you go. There you go.
You've got to love these testing centers where you stand in line and they're not even really social distancing in some of these, and the masks aren't even always on. And here's an airborne disease, and the only testing site I would go to is a in your car. I mean, you're in New York, so you probably don't have that liberty. But at least in California, we can stay in our car and get tested in a lot of places.
Yeah, absolutely. And just now, by the way, apparently the Biden administration is considering upgrading masks.
They're looking into it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're looking into it 2 years into it. So anyway,
I hear they're good.
Yeah, I hear they're good. N95, KN95. But Congress, by the way, Congress is now being provided KN95 masks. But the rest of us, good luck.
Well, and they put out a statement yesterday saying that they don't trust that people would actually really wear them anyway. So why bother?
Right. Why bother making them available for free during an airborne deadly virus? But I wanted to start, Colin, if you have this USA Today story. The corporate media has been very focused on inflation. And today, actually, inflation reaches highest level since 1982 as consumer prices jumped 7% in 2021. So that's the headline there. Pretty bad, particularly during a pandemic that prices are going up like this. Inflation hit a fresh 39-year high in December as a drop in energy costs wasn't enough to offset a steady march upward for staples such as food, rent, and cars amid stubborn supply chain bottlenecks and worker shortages. Consumer price index jumped 7% last year, the fastest since 1982, blah, 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 blah. So this is your generic corporate media story that's just basically making it seem like inflation is because energy prices have gone up and blah, blah, blah. I don't get to do this often, but I have to give props to Elizabeth Warren. I wish, it's tough to do. I wish, she had a right to run for president. Would have been nice if she dropped out when it was very clear she had no chance. Maybe help the actual progressive get elected, but I digress. But I wanted to play this clip because Elizabeth Warren, one thing you could say, she's good at getting a congressional hearing soundbite. She has had a lot of moments. She grilled Federal Reserve Chair Powell, who basically admitted that, this inflation isn't just because prices are going up. It's because of greedy corporations and companies that have monopolies are price gouging the hell out of you and I. If you could play that, Colin.
Let me ask it the other way then, because we're still kind of doing Econ 101 here. If you're a corporation that has eaten up most of the competition and cornered the market, is it easier for you to raise prices on your customers and maximize your profits because you don't have to worry about losing your business? In other words, you've lost the discipline that the market imposes.
In principle, if you don't have competition and you're a monopolist, yes, you can raise your prices.
Okay, and over the past year, we know that prices have risen because of supply chain problems, unexpected shifts in the demand for goods, and even higher labor costs. But if corporations were simply passing along these costs in highly competitive markets, would the company's profit margins have changed much?
So many things affect those that calculation. In principle, you could be right, but
well, it's very much not what we're seeing right now. Today, nearly 2 out of 3 of the biggest publicly traded corporations in the country are reporting fatter profit margins than they reported before the pandemic, which doesn't sound like they're just passing along costs. So let me ask you, does that increase in profit margins combined with greater market concentration in industry after industry suggest to you that some corporations may be passing along increased costs and at the same time charging more on top of that to fatten their profit margins?
That could be right. It could also just be, though, that demand is incredibly strong and that they're raising prices because they can.
Well, that's the point. They're raising prices because they can, and they're not being competed down. Market.
There you go. You got it. So I could say a lot. Ladies first. Your thoughts on Jerome Powell? I mean, honestly, all you needed to have from that is, well, they can, so they do.
I mean, that's exactly it. And I know you said it, and I'm going to take it and run with it. But I do feel like Elizabeth Warren loves having these sound bites, and then when it comes time to leverage power to do anything to try to change this, nothing has changed. I know she loves to say that she was a big agitator in the side of Barack Obama and Biden way back when, but nothing changed. Income inequality has only grown. These corporations have only consolidated more. So I love that soundbite. I'm waiting for, the email to come asking me to help her, donate to her because she's got to keep fighting in Congress. And I agree, of course, with all of that, but so does most of the country. Like, who is that actually for anymore? I don't even know.
Right. And what's amazing to me about it is essentially, I mean, it's been obvious for a while now that these corporations, they might have initially been passing off increases on their end. But I mean, the data shows that they have been raking in profits and that they have been price gouging across the board, from supermarkets to, the greediest of the greedy. Yet that's kind of been twisted into, it's a booming economy. It's a booming economy. The economy's rebounding. So it's kind of like, who's it rebounding for? Because these corporations are jacking up prices under the guise of inflation. And there are no actual laws against any of that. There are no laws. There's technically supposed to be competitive laws. There's been some reports that Biden has hired tougher antitrust people. I haven't seen shit. But it kind of is, I guess, refreshing to hear the Federal Reserve Chairman accidentally admit, no, these corporations are screwing you all because they can, and we're not going to do anything about it. What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, well, I think you're perfectly in line with what's going on. I mean, when inflation is rising at this rate and corporate profits are perfectly in sync with that, what's the check on getting us out of this situation? There are no checks and balances in the law. I mean, we're basically in a price gouging situation is what it is. And in an emergency, we have laws against price gouging on a local level, but we were in a prolonged 2-year situation of price gouging. And when all the metrics that you judge your economy on are how well the stock market's doing and how well corporations are doing, we're going to stay in this situation for a long time.
Yeah. And I want to piggyback also because I think it's important. Listen, I don't want to get attacked by the woke brigade. I think Elizabeth Warren, obviously every right to run for president. Before she abandoned Medicare for all and started moving towards the neoliberal end, like she did have some good policies, whatever the hell she was talking about. I think her thing was like, I don't remember her tagline, but something along the lines of, here's my plan, or what
I have a plan for that.
Yeah, I have a plan for that. But it just goes to show you, imagine two things. Number one, that she genuinely was about the policies rather than this egocentric silliness. Oh, well, Bernie's supporters were too hard on me and too negative and too many snake emojis. She should have dropped out after New Hampshire. Okay. Yeah. She should have dropped out after New Hampshire when I think she came in third or fourth place in her backyard next to Massachusetts. Who knows? It's, a Monday morning quarterback at this point, but at least on Super Tuesday, there were a lot of states that Bernie came close to winning that Warren got a significant portion of the votes because she had never dropped out and she was still on the ballot. So alternative history is a strong thing. The second thing is, other than in hearings with Jerome Powell, what is Elizabeth Warren doing about this?
Right. That's the thing. Yeah. Yeah. And
she's coasted on these sound bites. She gets credit for creating the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. But she Obama immediately didn't put her in charge of that and said that Republicans wouldn't put her in the position to run it. So she created an organization that it's sort of like the Congressional Progressive Caucus. It's like you can say all these things, but what are you doing? How are you regulating? And her solutions always come down to a little more regulation on capital instead of, that's why her campaign strategy was big structural change to break that down and say, that's not who I am. I'm for big structural change. But when you're not for Medicare for all, are you for a big structural change? No. Yeah. And that's where progressives have been, I don't care if you like Warren, that's fine. Whoever likes Warren, but
just
her betrayal won't be forgiven by a lot of us ever.
Yeah, if she actually cared about the policies she pretended to, and when everybody entered and they all said, we're all as progressive as Bernie. If the roles had been reversed and Bernie hadn't dropped out, he would have in a second thrown all of support behind her. He wanted her to run in 2016. So I think it just shows how lacking her actual support of the policies she pretends to fight for, really.
Right. And I want to drill in more to this price gouging that's under the guise of inflation. If you have the Guardian piece, Colin. So this is from Robert Reich. Yeah, whatever. He was Bill Clinton's labor secretary. Occasionally has a good idea. Came out after the fact, once he was out of office and not working under Clinton, basically saying Clinton, was a right winger. Wish he would have said that like when he was there. But he had this interesting piece in the Guardian where he's talking about this. And he's saying a major reason for price rises is supply bottlenecks, as Jerome Powell, chair of the Federal Reserve, has pointed out. He believes they're temporary, and he's probably right. But there's a deeper structural reason for this inflation, one that appears to be growing worse: the economic concentration of the American economy in the hands of a relative few corporate giants with the power to raise prices. If markets were competitive, companies would keep their prices down in order to prevent competitors from grabbing away customers. But they're raising prices even as they raked in record profits. How can this be? They have so much market power, they could raise prices with impunity. And this is the point. This is what I've covered on the ground for years. What he just described is what CNN is describing as a booming economy.
Right.
What CNBC and all these corporate Neanderthals are talking about, where unemployment's at the lowest rate in, I don't know what it is right now, but lowest rate in decades, and GDP is bouncing back. If you actually look underneath the hood, we're about to get to the Kroger situation. It's an economic Hunger Games out there. But honestly,
Marsha Fudge put out a tweet, I think yesterday or the day before, that we're the only developed country that has a booming economy and like thriving in this global pandemic. It only took 1 million bodies, right? Like, and then all the rest of the suffering. I mean, that's quite a flex there when we are in this mass devastation. People can, and I know you're about to get to it with what's happening at Kroger's and all these huge corporations that double dip, right? They don't pay their employees enough. Then those same employees have to be helped out by the state. So they're getting it both ways. They're getting huge tax incentives, and we're helping subsidize their employees who they don't pay a living wage.
Right. And also, Pat, this whole talking point, one of Biden's shining achievements, the only one, was quote unquote cutting childhood poverty in half with that whole 1-year child tax credit. I mean, it's not bad. It's a good thing. I'm for structural change, not neoliberal tax incentives, but that's better than nothing. But how do you have a booming economy if you have such child poverty in the first half?
Yeah, and how do you let that lapse? And how did the original study that said this cut child poverty in half? A big element to that was that they were going to have a $15 minimum wage. And then once that was removed, the study said, you know what, that really didn't matter. We're still cutting child poverty in half with this, which I find unrealistic. I think that's bullshit. But the problem is the people this is why Kroger and the striking workers is our real power right now, in my sense, and why I appreciate your coverage of a lot of these actions, is that the people that we have in charge who have to change these laws and do some regulating and restructure how our economy has worked are benefiting from this system. They're all allowed to trade stocks. They have no incentive to really look out for workers. There's none. And winning elections doesn't even matter. If you lose your election, you're going to get a corporate job immediately. You're going to get a lobbyist job. You're going to,
what are you talking about? Nancy Pelosi tells me it's a free market and I could trade stocks whatever I want.
Because this is a free market, and we are a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that.
Yeah,
it's a free market, but she beats almost all investors in her brilliant choices in stocks.
Just follow her trades and do what Nancy does.
Magical.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other element here is I've never jumped on board with Fraud Squad and all this just because I'm not 16, but they deserve criticism. They deserve criticism. Right. You cannot have a better opportunity to go after, basically this new Gilded Age than a pandemic. Right. But essentially, for the most part, the elected progressives, whatever you want to call them, the squad plus, they've been trying this inside baseball negotiations within the Democratic Party, being in the room, which Warren infamously said, it's better to be at the table, whatever. But none of the squad, Ro Khanna, Pramila Jayapal, have gone after any of this during this pandemic. It very late into when people were about to be evicted, they did some activism on the steps of the Capitol that worked temporarily. So it showed public pressure going after the Democratic Party, who was allowing that eviction moratorium to lapse. It actually worked. Yeah. Suddenly they could figure out a way to extend it. So I just wanted your thoughts. What Warren, credit to her, got the Federal Reserve Chair to admit, well, because they can. Why aren't progressives on a crusade during this pandemic, leveraging what this pandemic has been exposing about this new Gilded Age we live in?
Yeah, it's so frustrating. They don't leverage their power. They don't seem to welcome the hatred that they talked about when they were on the outside. And it really sort of makes it's made I'm not a non-voter. Certainly I voted in every single election since I was 18, but it really is a way of suppressing democracy because you work so hard for these people who say they're going to fight for you, and then they get in there and they capitulate right away, and they tell you they're playing, as you said, the inside game, and you don't know what's going on. I mean, even Bernie, there was that interview with Crystal Ball where she kind of called him out on it, and he was like, now wait, you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. Well, what's happening behind the scenes, I don't know, but I see what's happening in the front of the scenes, and it's nothing. We have no raised minimum wage. We have no expanded Medicare. We have no, big pharma negotiating prices. I mean, they failed. And I know that he just put out, I know you did a show on it yesterday, but it's like a little too late. We've known, again, like they don't need to convince the public. The public is on their side. All of the policies that Bernie ran on were majority popular across the board. So these sound bites and these articles and op-eds are, it's wonderful because I feel like, okay, you're in my corner, but it really doesn't matter if you're not, walking the walk.
Right. And I also think, Pat, at the end of the day, Bernie's, when he ran for president, what he said is, no, once I get in there, I'm not going to first meet with Mitch McConnell and talk about compromise. I'm going to tell him to look out the window at my army. That's what he said. I try to be fair. Right. I think Bernie brought millions of people into the process, but I've also said he was weak in 2016 and 2020. Yeah. He brought a spoon to a political gunfight, and the results are what they are. Doesn't mean throw the baby out with the bathwater, right. But his organizing principle, which was to activate the base, right. He said, let's get rid of Trump, and then on day one fight Biden. Well, it's way past day one. Yeah, and all we've gotten, I just covered it the other day. He kind of sort of criticized Biden in an interview with The Guardian. So I don't know. I mean, I agree with you on one end that the worker strikes, which I've been covering extensively, are right now a big hope, and workers are starting to see success. But on the electoral piece, unless they all magically overnight start to get a backbone, I don't see anything that would stop these companies from doing what they're doing, or to stop, the trend of income inequality. Yeah.
Well, to me, the few examples we have of massive public pressure, the strikes, of course, but public shaming more so. Mm-hmm. So the one instance where the Biden administration was called out in the press for their mocking the idea of distributing masks to people, and then what do you know, that just got a lot of airplay, and suddenly the Biden administration could administer masks. And then so you also have the eviction.
But they can talk about it.
So
they can talk about
it. So the few examples of a lot of coverage being drawn to an issue have resulted fairly well. So we have examples. So that makes it even more critical to me and more ridiculous that the Squad and Squad Plus and, that they aren't using that force. They aren't. The benefit of people like AOC is she has the ability to get a microphone and camera in front of her at any time and draw some attention to these issues. So they have case studies that have worked, right? And we're not seeing enough of it. That's all. That's where I land on it.
Before we move on to Kroger, I want to mention, granted, local level, but we have a case study that works doing what we're talking about. Her name's Shama Sawant in Seattle.
That's right.
Okay. So Shama Sawant, Status Coup's audience knows her. She's a socialist, loud and proud. She, is not a member of the Democratic Party. She goes after neoliberals, the mayor of Seattle, the city council. But she is very, very intertwined with the activist base of workers, organizers. She basically is one of those, only inside Seattle City Hall. And because she's been so available to the activist base, because she has worked year after year after year with workers, activists, minorities, the homeless, in Seattle, she has survived a recent recall election. She has survived Amazon trying to get her out of office. She has survived millions of dollars against her, which is a lot of money on local city politics to be. So she survived that. And she just survived a December recall, getting close to the same amount of people to come out to vote against the recall that came out for the regular November election.
Right.
So it just shows you, listen, could Ashama Sawant go to Washington and not be a member of the Democratic Party and just be socialist alternative? I don't know.
Right.
But whether you have somebody that's inside the Democratic Party or not, could they go scorched earth and rally an activist base? Absolutely. But we're not seeing that. So it's a shame. Which brings me to another wonderful story of capitalism. Colin, if you have the first tweet from More Perfect Union, a survey was done. And remember, folks, press that like button right under the video. It helps us get this stream out. As my wonderful guest can tell you, YouTube is not really so big on sharing independent media content or pushing us in their algorithm. So we need you to press that like button, share, super chats, all that good stuff. So a survey of 10,000 Kroger supermarket workers reveals that 2/3 of employees are living in poverty and struggling to survive. The grocery company's CEO made $20 million in 2021. Meanwhile, 40% of workers cannot afford food and 14% have been homeless in the last year. So that chart shows you, do you have enough money to pay for basic expenses every month? 63% say no, 37% say yes. Will you have enough money to support yourself after you retire based on the wages and benefits that you receive from Kroger? 92% say no. So that's pretty overwhelming. Kroger CEO compensation, it went from a little under 10 million a decade ago to over 23 million this CEO is making, while his workers are basically embroiled in an economic Hunger Games. Another question was, in the past year, have you had to borrow money from your family or friends to pay for basic expenses? 42% of workers said yes. The average Kroger worker is paid $17.89 an hour, which is 19% less than the average full-time living wage of $22 an hour needed by Kroger workers for basic necessities. The shortfall for full-time new workers is $6.72 an hour, short of being able to afford the necessities of life. The wage deficit of workers is larger than the living wage gap. What's next? This one, more than 2/3 of Kroger workers struggle for survival due to low wages and part-time work schedules. 9 out of 10 Kroger workers report that their wages have not increased as much as basic expenses, such as food and housing, have increased. Since 1990, wages for the most experienced Kroger food clerks have declined from 11 to 22%. Let me repeat. Since 1990, their wages have declined from 11 to 22%, adjusted for inflation, across the 3 regions surveyed. Across the entire grocery industry, 29% of the labor force is below or near the federal poverty threshold. Nearly 2/3 of Kroger workers say they do not earn enough money to pay for basic expenses every month. Among the workers who are unable to afford necessities, 44% say they're unable to pay for rent, and 39% say they're unable to pay for groceries. 14% of Kroger workers are homeless now or have been homeless during the past year. And that chart shows, do you have enough money to pay for basic necessities, basic expenses? 63% say no. And Colin, if you could fast forward, there were some quotes from the workers, which will just crush your soul. Sorry to do that. Quote, if you could full screen that. I've had to get another job just to make ends meet. I will have nothing for savings upon retirement. I will be essentially homeless. This was from a meat clerk at Quality Foods in Washington. Another worker, our workforce is almost non-existent. How we are even operating, ? There are too many customers for us to handle safely and responsibly, but that's how Kroger wants it. Another person said, when my store manager asked us to simply remove a moldy strawberry from a piece of cake and then replace it back into the case to be sold, it was clear he did not care about the well-being of customers, of us, and just wanted the sale. To put someone in jeopardy for $3.99, ridiculous. And once again, there's the chart of the CEO, which went from a little under 10 million in 2010 over 23 million. And by the way, it just so happens in the last 2 years of a pandemic has seen the biggest spike. So I know people want kind of like reactionary hot take content that allows them to escape on YouTube. I'm sorry to have to provide this treachery, but I wanted to ask you, Leila, to me, this is an economic Hunger Games. And the thing that drives me insane, it's not just Kroger.
No.
I mean, I've covered Amazon extensively. During the interviews I did with the John Deere workers on strike, the Starbucks workers, different places. Some of them are more severe. Some of them are less severe. But a constant you see people working multiple jobs. Right. A constant you see workers, the old adage, like squeeze as much juice out of the orange as you can. They're being asked to do more with less. That example of the moldy strawberry. And to tell you the truth, I'm not defending that manager, but a lot of these managers are getting it from the top,
right?
From,
right, the
CEO and his underlings, disregard safety, this and that. It's all about profit. Yet, Colin, if you have this article, I just want to contrast this from CNN. Lawmakers discuss additional COVID relief amid Omicron, but talks stall. And the reason I wanted to show that article is because here, and a senior Biden administration official poured cold water on any further stimulus at this time, leaving the possibility open to some relief for restaurants. Quote, no, there might be something small for restaurants, but the economy is booming. There are millions of open jobs, and we do not believe people should be sitting at home if they are vaccinated and boosted. So does that sound like a booming economy, Leila?
I mean, it's appalling. It's appalling. And also, in that article, the average Kroger worker is making over $17 an hour, and we're still talking about fighting for 15, seeing that $17 an hour doesn't cut it, and that 2/3 of them are living in poverty and 14% are homeless. I think you might have done a segment with Amazon workers, and it was they were like living in their car, so they would leave. It wasn't yours. I thought it was.
No, I'm just asking. Did you read my production sheet? Because I have that clip that we're going to play.
Ah, look at that. I did my research.
Let me play that. Let me play that clip. So last time I was at the Amazon warehouse in Staten Island, and by the way, this is New York. So a lot of these workers are making $18, $19, which in New York is the equivalent of like $12 to $13.
Yeah.
Because New York's one of the most expensive places to live. So I was interviewing Amazon workers, and lo and behold, a lot of those workers are working 12, 13-hour shifts and then sleeping in the parking lot. The PR that Amazon puts out there, you get all these commercials that are rainbows and sunshines, and they're helping people through school, and it's wonderful being an Amazon worker. Well, there's a lot of people that are homeless Amazon workers.
Right. At last count, there were about over 100 cars in this outside parking lot and the inside parking lot, the covered multi-layer lot behind me. And they're there 24/7, including on the holidays, like on Christmas and New Year's Day when there aren't that many people here. They're here 24/7. And I feel for them. I'm one of them. So, we try to advocate, and I'm trying to hook up people with other people so that we can do roommate situations and share expenses and stuff. That also plays into the fact that hourly workers, mostly Black and brown employees, do not get promoted. They just don't get promoted. They're not given interviews. Everybody in there in these buildings plays favorites. You have to be a young white male fresh out of college in order to get into a management position here. And it creates a huge us versus them situation in there, because a lot of those kids are very spoiled, very racist, very sexist, and they're constantly targeting some of the best employees that Amazon has in there.
You said you're one of them, so you're currently homeless working at Amazon?
Currently am, yeah. I have been homeless for the past, 2.5, almost 3 years that I've been here now. And I haven't been able to afford a place. None of my family's out here. It's mind-boggling because the rest of the country is thinking, well, she's making more than minimum wage. How come she can't afford a place to live? Well, it's because there's no affordable rent out here. And we don't make enough, and we don't get promoted. I've been with the company since 2017. I have an AA degree. I've trained literally hundreds of people since I've been in Jersey and New York, and I've applied over a dozen times for positions at the next level, Tier 3. I can't even get an interview. That's ridiculous. And for me to have to work for people half my age and answer to people half my age who have no experience here and are really disrespectful to the workers, it's beyond frustrating, really beyond frustrating.
From Kroger to Amazon, your thoughts?
Well, and that's why, talking about the raw numbers without putting them in relation to what they connect, the purchasing power of them, right? Which is why, anybody talking about $15 minimum wage at this point, it's a joke. We should be talking 35 and knowing that we'll compromise down to 30, right? Because that would be a basic living wage. And that's not even a thriving wage, which I feel like, we all deserve. But yeah, so, they capitulated when Bernie brought his force to Amazon a couple of years ago and, everybody went up to $15, right? Because it's a drop in the bucket. They will spend millions of dollars to shut down a union because they know when they unionize, they will lose millions of dollars. So they're always doing that cost benefit in this. They're always doing class warfare. It's just amazing that we have no checks and balances on these companies.
Right. Pat, your thoughts too, because the thing that kind of has always driven me crazy, whether it be Standing Rock or other things I've covered, there really is an alternative reality. There's several, you got the anti-vaxxers, there's like a lot of alternate realities, but there's an alternate reality that is really, really solidified by corporate media that just says the economy's booming or not booming based on unemployment rate, based on GDP, based on whatever their parent companies tell them, I guess the price of their parent company's stock. But how could you, in the wealthiest country on earth, say it's booming if you have charts that show a CEO is making $23 million a year?
Right.
And that's not even counting bonuses, by the way. Yet his workers are talking about they're not going to be able to retire. I'm talking about Kroger workers. Kroger workers they can't retire. 42% have to borrow money. I think 63% said they can't afford basic things like rent. It is such a bullshit propaganda alternative reality that is manufactured. And again, from lack of political leadership, but also a very powerful echo chamber of the corporate media. A lot of people really believe this shit.
But that's what's so frustrating to me about progressives and Democrats that are letting their base down. So many people are not tuned into that narrative. They hear that narrative, but they also look out their street. They go to Home Depot. They see I live in Sacramento, California, and every square nook of available space has homeless people now. And these dual narratives are an opportunity for the left to really get out there and say, look, it would be really easy for people to say, go down your street, drive down by the freeway and look at all the homeless camps. Is our economy thriving? So you got all these workers at all these places, Amazon workers making $17 an hour and need social programs to survive. And all those programs just come from tax dollars or, MMT, whatever. But all those programs are basically taking our money and funneling it to the corporations because we're supplementing their minimum wage or $17 an hour because they need to survive. So, and for them now to put this blame on inflation, like we can't, if we expand worker rights and worker protections and, social programs, that's the harm. They're really cutting the last safety net that we have at this point.
Right.
Well, and you see how scared they are of labor, right? And why they're coming out. Last year, the teachers were our heroes. The essential workers were our frontline workers, essential workers. And now, even the head of the teachers union is coming out against her own membership for striking for safe conditions. And they're, I don't know if you're going to get into the whole school closure stuff, but they are doing everything possible to sublimate worker power on every level.
Well, wasn't it interesting that when Amazon workers in Alabama were unionizing or trying to unionize or other workers were on strike, when Jen Psaki, President Biden's press secretary, was asked about it, she hemmed and hawed. And actually, I think she said, well, legally, we can't really talk about it. But then when the Chicago Teachers Union, when they were on strike for safer conditions, they could talk about that. Yeah. Oh, there was a concerted, there was a concerted campaign to talk about that because Democrats believe Terry McAuliffe lost in Virginia because schools were closed too long. They think it's a toxic political thing. To a certain extent, it is bad for Democrats with schools closed. My opinion is it's not a one size fits all. There are certain areas that schools should be open where cases aren't surging like insanity. And there are certain areas where, for example, my friend who's a New York City teacher told me we're a glorified babysitting service right now. I mean, most of I think he said 6 or 7 of his colleagues, teachers, were out. So schools are being, classes are being added on top of each other, consolidated. You have substitute teachers teaching. You really have no consistent lesson plan. He told me there's really no learning going on per se. It's just a glorified babysitting service. But the scorched earth that the Democrats now, Biden, Jen Psaki, by the way, CNN too, like Erin Burnett on CNN. She hates those teachers unions. The scorched earth against those teachers unions if it's about Amazon, if it's about Starbucks workers, if it's about John Deere workers, Nabisco, the list goes on. Hey, they have the right to unionize. Next question.
Yeah, and also the framing of it as some binary project where teachers just want schools closed forever. It's not. We're trying to flatten the curve, but also there's a list of demands to make schools safer, right? There are plenty of private schools.
Ventilation.
Yeah, ventilation, masking, weekly testing. I mean, they're not saying that they never want to go back to teaching. That's just absurd. So to frame it that way, and then 2 years into a global pandemic, not to have helped the infrastructure of most of the public schools in this country, and then to want to send people back in and to change, 6 feet, 3 feet, when we know 18 feet isn't even enough distance. And as you said, right now, even the schools that are open, especially in New York or Midwest and East Coast, they don't have proper heating, they don't have proper ventilation, they don't have proper teaching because half of them are out. They're taking anybody. It's a babysitting situation so that parents can go back to work. So,
well, also, it adds to truths that have been going on for 30, 40 years in this country that we don't like to talk about on corporate media. Number one, there's been a 40-year controlled attack on public schools by the Republican Party. Frankly, the Democratic Party has been complicit in a whole lot of cases.
All those charter schools,
Yeah. So, I mean, you want to talk about why there's... Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's one of the problems with selectively opening schools that meet certain criteria, is because you find that the private schools and schools in areas that are economically well off, they did institute the protections that are needed, where in poor neighborhoods they don't have those protections. So if this is a prolonged situation, you could really create an imbalance of education.
Right. And the other thing I'll bring up, going for the teachers, one topic I just have not heard in depth on all of CNN's pandemic town halls. Pat, Leila, why don't we have enough N95 masks in the United Corporations of America? Why don't we have enough ventilators? Why don't we have enough gowns, shields, eye goggles? Could it have anything to do with NAFTA? Could it have anything to do with, the trade deals we've made with China, normalizing trade relations, this and that, where we offshored all of our manufacturing capacity? Right. And I'm all for jobs in Mexico, China. I'm not knocking those people that need to work. I'm not for that those people get paid, $1 a day. But so the thing is, we made a deal with the devil, meaning the banks, the corporations that we allowed to write NAFTA and those trade deals 30 years ago. And then when there's a serious fucking situation, we can't make anything. And by the way,
nothing here. Yeah.
Why? By the way, again, Biden, Vanity Fair came out, I think it was in October, that the Biden administration, I don't want to misspeak, but they had an opportunity to in October increase the rapid tests, the antigen tests free, and they passed on it. Why would that be? So it's one thing after the other showing you we essentially have a purchased government, purchased by these corporations, and everything is falling through the cracks as a result, from the schools to Kroger. Because you want to know something? For all his warts, FDR would not stand by if the Kroger CEO was making went from 7 million to 23 million in 10 years, while his workers are asking people to borrow money and putting back moldy strawberries. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, they seem
Well,
much
and
more.
Biden-
Go ahead, Pat.
Sorry. I think I have a little bit of a lag here, so that's why I keep cutting you guys off. It's not my lack of civility, or it is. I don't know. But
Chivalry
obviously,
is dead.
Biden could have used the Defense Production Act and immediately, in getting into office, ramped up testing here, ramped up mask making here. All those things are pretty obvious when you've got 3 or 4 things you can do in a pandemic. Other than pay people to stay home, you can ramp those things up, and all the science said those things help.
Right.
So that the Washington narrative that, well, only half of America's going to wear masks, so why should we get N95s? Well, even that, do the math on half of America having N95s versus regular masks. So even if it doesn't change how many people wear masks, they're wearing better masks, so you're slowing the spread.
But even that said, I think there was a poll that came out in Morning Consult a few weeks ago saying that something like 70% of Americans want better masks, Right. I mean, I've been in 2 different medical facilities this last week, and everything's fine. I'm fine. But they were all wearing surgical masks. Why? Why are they wearing surgical masks 2 years into an airborne aerosolized virus?
Right. Absolutely. And by the way, I mean, listen, I wear an N95 mask. Yeah, it would be tough to wear that all day long in an Amazon factory as you're slaving away, moving products along. But the fact of the matter is, the fact that the government has not at least made it available, even if it's KN95 masks, which is one notch below, it's crazy. I mean, blink of an eye, we just went up to $770 billion defense budget. So that's considered national security. Actually protecting people from a deadly airborne virus, that's kind of, if we could do it, we'll try to fit that in. It's crazy.
I don't even know if we're defending anymore in this country, honestly, at this point. I mean, we really do feel like a failed nation, but that money keeps flowing to those military contractors. It's amazing.
And I think that the new strategy is to throw the CDC under the bus. I don't know if you picked up on that, but
they deserve it. But
when you've got Brian Seltzer saying the CDC is a joke, that's a little nod that's the next play, is that they're going to blame the CDC for all this. And I've already seen, prominent leftists online saying, well, Biden was just listening to the CDC. That's their, what do you want him to do? He's listening to the CDC.
And Delta's CEO.
I mean, it's absurd. And you want to know something? Honestly, the CDC probably has warts. So the FDA definitely has warts, this and that. But this comes from the top.
Yeah,
this comes from the top. Right. Biden could have corrected course. You have these people screaming about lockdowns, right? And, the lockdown left. Biden, first of all, I lived in New York City in the beginning of this thing in March and April 2020. That's when I got it. There was no lockdown in America. I don't know what these people are talking about. There was never a lockdown in the United Corporations of America. When there was stay-at-home orders, guess what? People were at Central Park. People were out. People were taking the subways in New York City, taking buses. So there was no lockdown. Italy had a lockdown. Other countries had a lockdown where you literally could not leave your home. So to me, I don't use the term lockdown, but Biden could have very simply said, we're giving you $2,000. We're nationalizing payroll like the United Kingdom did. So what you make, whatever it would be, you make 90% of your salary. Everybody enjoy Netflix for a month. If you don't have Netflix, we'll supply Netflix and stay home. People, there would be your, MAGA people and right wingers that don't like it, but there would be more people that kind of breathe a sigh of relief. And you could have drastically reduced the spread. Now, that does not address the fact that there's a certain portion of people who will not get vaccinated. That does not address the fact Biden, which to me is the biggest sin, and there's a lot of them, he will not force Moderna and Pfizer to share their formula. Because frankly, I don't know what you guys think, we could get 80% of America fully vaccinated. That would make a big, big difference. But if you just have more mutations coming from all over the world, we're going to have more Omicrons that to the individual could be milder, but it's not so much milder in terms of hospitalizations. I mean, right now, hospitalizations are at the highest records they were in 2021.
Yeah, well, when you allow it to let it rip through a community, I mean, basically it's like if you don't finish your course of antibiotics, we're just allowing it to sort of like spread through the community and learn and grow. And yeah, and to that point, when Biden, that big line, which was all political, that this was a pandemic of the unvaccinated, just to put pressure, on the red MAGA crowd. But if you truly believe that, then you have got to force Moderna to release the patents and tell Bill Gates and, the World Health Organization and Gavi that we have to get serious about it. And while they don't do that, they are just subjecting themselves to looking like enormous hypocrites, which is only fueling the anti-vax crowd.
Yeah, we've got a mutation factory in the world right now, basically. The level of vaccination, it's not enough. So you're going to have people walking around, and we're going to have new mutations. It's just inevitable. And the idea that the trajectory has to be towards milder and milder infections is not true. And we still have no idea what the long-term ramifications of getting COVID are. Like 10 years from now, we could all drop dead from COVID. I mean, it's not going to happen. But I mean, we truly don't know the long-term effects.
We know it's a vascular disease. We know it's eating people's organs. We know that on some level. And now all these people who, say, let it rip. Now, when the next pandemic comes, the next virus, and we all die, it's going to be, oh, well, she had comorbidities because she had COVID before, even though it was a mild case, right? So like they're just setting up this cyclical way of blaming individuals for their maladies.
I don't want to go too off the page on this, but I just want to point out there's a whole lot of very prominent YouTube hosts, Twitter people, this and that. They're very big on believing the scientists when it comes to climate change, but suddenly on a deadly pandemic that's killed millions of people around the world, 850,000 in America, for some reason, we can't trust science. Right. We can't trust medical experts. They're all part of this cabal to deceive everybody and big pharma. But I don't know, like it, and you're never going to win. I mean, we have people that come into the chat and you just can't convince them. But I kind of, just real quickly, I don't really understand the argument like big pharma. So don't trust the data. Because it's like, do we say don't take your insulin if you're a diabetic because it's manufactured by big pharma? And I said that to someone and they said, well, that has a lot more of a track record. And it's like, okay, but like this is now about over a year. The mRNA vaccine, the formula, that's been studied and in trialed for decades. So, I just want your quick thoughts. I don't really understand this big pharma argument. Yeah, big pharma is terrible, but they're not going to make profits if their products don't work.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the argument, so there's a few things going on, right? Like they have to decouple the profit motive from the medicine and the science. And that, when you see that they're coming out now with the fourth vaccination and we're never going to cure it, but you're always going to need to have a booster shot, that I understand why people might feel slightly skeptical because there's always that underlying profit motive. These people are not acting out of the goodness of their hearts, right? So, but there's a way to have dealt with that. I mean, through at one point, I think the American Prospect was putting out like lists of things that Biden could do with by executive order. And one of them was Medicare for all. And, if he had expanded people's ability to get healthcare for free and truly took away the profit motive. So people don't feel like, well, it's okay if I die from cancer, I don't get any healthcare for free for that. But when it's COVID and it's something that could affect rich people also, if all of those things intertwine, and it does sort of make people conspiracy theorists. I am 100% vaccine, pro-vaccine and pro-science, but big pharma terrifies me because they'll kill us all to make a profit, clearly.
Yeah. No, and I'll say, and I don't think it's just about the vaccine, but I think that there's a connection. There is a connection between deflated progressives, because it's not all right-wing MAGA people. Right. There's a real connection between stood up at the altar progressives who rode the Bernie wave in 2016 and 2020, and now feel rudderless, leaderless, no real direction of the left. When you have that vacuum, they could really shift towards some more, whatever you want to call it, right-wing conspiracy, because they just no longer trust the government. They no longer trust anything because they're realizing, oh, I did all these things. I knocked on doors. I voted. I volunteered. And I'm in the same spot I was. Yeah.
They're just completely disenfranchised. I mean, the few people they thought were fighting for them, they feel like have have sold out or something,
Yeah.
So what do they have to lean on? Bernie's movement, where is Bernie's movement? It's fractured into little segments. So the person that's attacking Bernie really hard might appeal to that person now because they feel betrayed by Bernie. So that person is also pushing an anti-vax narrative or something.
Right.
It's sort of like, I mean, I'm not relating anti-vaxxers to Nazis, but it's like white supremacists grows in areas where people are depressed and people need something to latch onto and believe in. And, being able to just go to work and pretend this virus isn't so damning and it's the man holding us down and the establishment, it fits on some level for some people because of where they are psychologically.
Yeah.
And it's a good segue because Leila, you had mentioned the dying empire.
Sorry, I just have to say Lila.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Yeah.
My bad. My bad. Lila, you had mentioned the dying empire earlier, and this story really, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it makes me want to cry. But the New York Times, this counter the echo chamber columnist Thomas Friedman, Colin, if you have it, and remember, folks, press that like button, share this stream. Biden-Cheney 2024.
Oh God.
Not Dick, Liz. Biden-Cheney 2024. Thomas Friedman suggests. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's kind of bizarre. He starts with an analogy to Israel-Palestine. I don't get his point at all. But I'm going to move down to the part that really made me lose my lunch. So he writes, America is facing an existential moment, Levitsky told me, noting that the Republican Party has shown that it isn't committed any longer to playing by democratic rules, leaving the United States uniquely threatened among Western democracies. That all means two things, he continued. First, this Trump cult version of the GOP must never be able to retake the White House, since Trump has made embracing the big lie that the 2020 election was a fraud prerequisite for being in the Trump GOP. His entire cabinet most likely would be people who denied or worked to overturn Biden's election victory. There's no reason to believe they cede power the next time. Quote, in a democracy, Levitsky said, parties lose popularity and they lose elections. That's normal. But a democracy cannot afford for this Republican Party to win again because they have demonstrated a ton of evidence that they are no longer committed to the democratic rules of the game. So Biden-Cheney is not such a crazy idea, I asked. Oh, boy. Quote, not at all, said Levitsky. Quote, we should be ready to talk about Liz Cheney as part of a blow-your-mind Israeli-style fusion coalition with Democrats. It is a coalition that says there is only one overriding goal right now. That is saving our democratic system. Pat, I don't know if you switched to whiskey in that mug.
I should.
Give me some.
Before I get to my thoughts, what do you guys think of that?
Well, you're seeing more and more articles like this with floating these crazy ideas because it's obvious Democrats aren't going to run on their record. They're going to run on January 6th and preserving democracy. And it's not that January 6th wasn't bad and wasn't a threat to democracy, because I do think it is dangerous and I take it very seriously. But it gives them cover to have a terrible record and never discuss the issues, never have to answer for their COVID response, never have to answer for the economic disparity in this country, because nothing else is more important than democracy. So this idea, whether it, obviously they're never going to actually run Cheney, but it's just planning this, it's creating this propaganda of stories that support this idea of democracy at risk.
Yeah.
So that's the purpose of the article.
I mean, if they actually thought democracy was at risk, they would be governing differently. And honestly, I don't think the Biden-Cheney ticket is all that outlandish. It should just be the Republican ticket. I mean, I talk to my liberal friends. Can they name first of all, they have no ideology apart from not Trump. The fact that all those Democrats were stumbling over themselves to hug the two Cheneys at the, January 6th Catskill Broadway show, whatever brouhaha that was, is so repulsive to me. Why welcome her in? Dick Cheney stole an election. I mean, he's an anti-democratic guy, but he just did it the right way through the Supreme Court. Like, well, I don't even understand where they're headed, except that there's really no difference between George W. Bush and Joe Biden anyway. So they should all have them. I just wish we had somebody on the left that would challenge them.
Right. And I also think, listen, with three white folks, I think I shouldn't say that. Yeah.
Safely.
Safely. But
I apologize.
I want to make clear, I understand democracy. There's different threats to democracy for Black people, Hispanic people, indigenous people, historically oppressed people. Right. They've been for a long time a threat just to vote, which is a bedrock of democracy. But with that said, I question this whole democracy thing because I don't know how you have a democracy. I mean, this is Princeton from 2014. Right. They did a study. We have an oligarchy. Yep. When 90% of the time, the majority of the public will is not implemented into policy, and I think I have a reverse. Almost virtually never the majority will is implemented into policy, but 90% of the time the elite's will is implemented into policy. That's kind of a CNN West Wing version of democracy. That's not like representative democracy, because in a representative democracy, like the people are elected to represent the will of the people. So it's kind of nauseating. It also goes back to Liz Cheney. I'm not going to blame her for everything George W. and Dick did, but she was on board with all of it. So not only did Dick Cheney steal an election, but they invaded a country on bullshit premises. So that's undemocratic.
But by the way, Biden was on board with all of that too. So
thank you. And by the way, that's something if Bernie would have went to the fight not holding a spoon, Biden lied about his Iraq war vote. He didn't just vote for it. He was 6 months after it doing speeches defending President Bush as the mood was abruptly shifting against the war. Biden was out there advocating for it. He was one of the Democrat behind the scenes whipping Democrats to vote for it. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. But, I got to say, this article, it's not too far off from what you see on CNN, MSNBC, obviously in the pages of the New York Times. It's this, let's kind of rewrite history under the guise of Trump is a unique terror. So let's normalize George W. Bush. Let's make Liz Cheney acceptable because she'll do the bare minimum and disown an insurrection. I don't know why that really gets you brownie points.
Welcome to the resistance.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I wonder from you guys, I mean, that's just one article, but these articles are not written at the New York Times in a vacuum.
Right.
Do you think that this could have some momentum? Not so much Cheney per se, but this Democrats should unite with like those few brave Republicans so we could keep Trump or the next Trump out of office. We
saw it at the Democratic convention, right? John Kasich got a longer speaking time than AOC. Bloomberg was one of the Democratic, not a real Democrat. Bloomberg was one of the Democratic nominees. I mean, and also on MSNBC, Nicole Wallace and all of the George W. Bush war criminals are their new hosts. So that's, it isn't a divide between right and left, as I know we all know. It's the corporations and the moneyed class versus everybody else. I mean, the difference, the air between Democrats and Republicans is basically a couple hashtags. And other than that, they all agree on the same thing. They're not really fighting it out over there.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like I said, to me, it's propaganda. It's keeping them from having to embrace any progressive issue on the left. So they keep the narrative around a better, even if it's like, oh, the Democratic Party is pretty much Republican, they can still say, yeah, sure. But democracy is not at risk under us. And that's what really matters. But in the end, they're not going to go with a Cheney. They're going to go with, Hakeem Jeffries or something. They're going to pull an identity. They're going to make a fake play to the left, which is what they always do. So this is just like, it's fluff to control the narrative, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to get too far into 2024, but I got news for you. I don't know how they would get out. I don't know how they would throw Vice President Harris over the Titanic. Under this, but I mean, that goes completely against the woke brigade, because I was hammered in 2020 on the campaign trail for covering her critically, challenging some of her supporters that I interviewed. So people who were genuinely criticized for journalistically pointing out facts about her. I don't know how the Democratic Party is going to figure out a way to get around her without essentially melting in its own woke politics.
Yeah, but it never seems to matter, right? I mean, even just going back to the democracy, looking at how the primaries went for Democrats. And I mean, Hillary Clinton and her group pushed the big lie for the last 5 years, right? That it was Russia, and that, I mean, Donald Trump, as disgusting as he is, was elected democratically. But most liberals don't believe that. Right. They believe Russia hacked the democracy. And so then to turn and see that, the MAGA crowd thinking that their election was stolen. I mean, we are living through, I think, truly unprecedented times, which does not mean, as Michelle Obama said recently, that we all just have to suck it up and it's the most important, election coming up of our lifetime. Because again, if Democrats truly thought that, they would be fighting for policies that they know are overwhelmingly popular on both sides of the aisle. Bernie goes onto a Fox town hall and gets a standing ovation talking about Medicare for all and raising the wage. If Democrats cared about winning, they know the policies that they could be fighting for.
Well, I mean, to wrap it up, I was told in 2004, when I first started paying attention, that was the most important election of my lifetime. 2008, that was the most important election of my lifetime. 2012, we can't let Gordon Gekko in there. That was the most important election. 2016, can't let Orange Mussolini in there. 2020, got to get rid of Orange Mussolini. You're already seeing the fundraising emails for the midterms under Save Democracy. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not trying to I think voting is important. I know a lot of people are starting to say, to hell with electoral politics. I don't think it's either or. I do think there are a lot of instances where voting is important. But I'm not going to lie to you and say it hasn't become a formulaic marketing exercise in terms of saving democracy, this and that. Well, all I know, if Joe Biden wanted a $15 minimum wage, he wouldn't have preemptively surrendered it to an unelected parliamentarian. If he wanted a public option, we'd have a public option. Right. The things he said he was willing to do, which he didn't really run on many policies per se. He's preemptively surrendered on all that for one reason. We live in the United Corporations of America, and whether it's Biden, Trump, DeSantis, they will do whatever their donors allow them to do. On that note, where can people find your guys' great work, Lila Charles Lay and Pat the Burner, real name, Pat Cody?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us on. This was so much fun. I've been following you for years, and I really appreciate this opportunity. We have our show every Wednesday night at 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern. So when we get off with you, we're going to start, so much that we talked about today, we'll continue on with. And our show, we do talk about politics and, all the manufacturing narratives that are happening on corporate media. We also tend to be a little overserved during the hour. We drink a lot and try to have some fun because it's pretty desperate times out there. So we hope that people will join us, Punch Up Pod.
And where can people find it?
Twitter and YouTube. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Twitter and YouTube. I just want to say thank you for all the work you're doing. I mean, to me, on the ground and strikes are where our power lies right now. Strikes beget more strikes, and workers start seeing successes fighting back against the oligarchy. I mean, I hate to say it sounds so corny every time I say oligarchy, but we really do. We need to back these strikes, and as independent media, I think the most important thing we can do is give more voice to the workers. So let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's tough sledding these days. YouTube has really made it difficult. If you're not, YouTube really favors more reactionary, hot take bullshit, and it's made it that actual reporting, whether you're on the ground, whether you're just, interviewing interesting people, doesn't pop out as much. Their algorithm does not favor that. So it makes it harder and harder to grow a real reporting network, to fund it, because it costs money. Trying my best. We're trying some new things here at Status Coup, but I appreciate you guys coming on. I appreciate the kind words, and we'll definitely have you back on.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching, folks. We will see you back tomorrow. Take care.